of the Buddha, a star, mirage, a flame of a lamp, an illusion, a drop of dew, a bubble, a dream, a flash of lightning, a cloud, see conditioned things as such. Through this merit may sentient beings attain the state of all seeing, subdue the four faults, and be delivered from the ocean of cyclic existence perturbed by the waves of aging, sickness, and death. This ground anointed with perfume, flowers strewn Mount Meru, four lands, sun and moon, imagined as a Buddha land and offered to you. May all beings enjoy this pure land. Holy Gurus, in the space of your truth body, from billowing clouds of your wisdom and love, let fall the rain of the profound and extensive Dharma, in whatever form is suitable for subduing sentient beings. Idam Guru Ratna Mandalakam Niryatayami. I take refuge until I have awakened in the Buddhas, the Dharma, and the Sangha. By the merit I create by listening to the Dharma, I will attain Buddhahood in order to benefit all sentient beings. I take refuge until I have awakened in the Buddhas, the Dharma, and the Sangha. By the merit I create by listening to the Dharma, I will attain Buddhahood in order to benefit all sentient beings. I take refuge until I have awakened in the Buddhas, the Dharma, and the Sangha. By the merit I create by listening to the Dharma, I will attain Buddhahood in order to benefit all sentient beings.
So take a few moments to refresh the bodhicitta motivation you generated earlier today and apply that to what we're doing here now. Really feel that you're here for the benefit of all living beings, to help everyone be free of suffering and its causes, achieve happiness and its causes, up to the highest happiness of enlightenment. And then let's spend some time contemplating the benefits of patience. It does take energy, effort to practice patience and cultivate it further. But if we understand the benefits of doing so, then we'll have more energy to do that. So I'll just go through the benefits mentioned in the text, Lama Tsongkhapa's Middle-Length Lamrim. First, he mentions you'll have few enemies. So if we have more patience, we'll have fewer enemies. And then he mentions we won't be separated from dear ones. So if we lack patience and we have too much anger, then people like our friends and family members will want to stay away from us. So we'll be separated from them. With more patience, that won't happen. And then the third benefit he mentions is experiencing a lot of happiness and mental ease. And then he mentions when we come to the end of our life, we'll be able to die without regret, and we'll be born in a fortunate situation in the next life. So see if you can conclude that working on patience, increasing patience, is good for yourself, good for others, good for this life, good for future lives, up to enlightenment. So after last week's class, I got an email from an online student who asked about this teaching that we went through on the destructive nature of anger, how getting angry destroys huge amounts of merit, mentioning 100 eons of merit, 1,000 eons of merit, and so on. And he asked if this teaching is to be taken literally or is to be interpreted. And I don't really know for sure, but I wrote back to him that the Buddha did talk about the destruction of virtue by malice in this one text. I'm not sure if it's a sutra because it says it's in the Vinaya, the questions of Upali. And this book only has a portion of it, but in the Lamrim Chenmo, it has the complete passage. And so in this passage, Upali, one of the Buddha's main disciples, asked the Buddha how great roots of virtue are used up, diminished, erased, and extinguished. And the Buddha replied, Upali, when such a sin as malice is done to fellow practitioners, it is like a wound or maiming. I cannot see its full impact. Upali, this diminishes, erases, and extinguishes those great roots of virtue. Therefore, Upali, if you would not feel malice toward a burned stump, what need to mention feeling that way toward a body with consciousness? So there the Buddha does say, diminishes, erases, and extinguishes great roots of virtue. Although he doesn't mention any time, he doesn't, give figures about how much virtue is extinguished. And in fact, he even says here, I can't see its full impact. But it seems that he did speak about this in other sutras. There's a mention, I don't know if it's in here or the Lamrim Chenmo, but another sutra which is called the Play of Manjushri Sutra. And I found it on the 84,000 website. And I did find a place in there that there's a part of the sutra involves a dialogue between Manjushri and a young woman in Rajgir. And this woman had become his disciple. And they had this dialogue in front of a large group of people, including the king and lots of ministers and citizens. So they were discussing. Manjushri was asking her questions, she was answering. So one of the questions was about anger. He asked, what is the nature of anger? And she replies, Manjushri, that which destroys the roots of virtue collected for 100 eons is called anger. So it's not the Buddha talking, okay, it's this young girl. But anyway, it seems that sutra, that part of the sutra is used within other teachings to say, oh yeah, you destroy 100 eons of anger. And Shantideva mentions 1,000 eons, and I don't know where he got that figure from. There may be other sutras. So I'm not in a position to say if these figures, some certain number of eons are to be taken literally or not. But it did make me wonder, after this person asked the question, I kind of wondered, because I do remember reading that in these ancient languages like Pali and Sanskrit, they would sometimes use large numbers, like 500, which isn't meant to be taken literally. It just means a lot. And I guess it's similar to how we sometimes talk. I do anyway, and Venerable does as well. You say zillions, billions. We don't really mean that literally, Nobody's going to count and check to see if what we're saying is correct. It just means a lot, lots. So I thought maybe that's the case with these figures. And I asked Venerable Children, I wrote her an email and asked her, and she said that, yeah, she thinks that that's probably the case. And she said, because how much merit is destroyed depends on so many factors that are different in each situation, right? So each incidence of anger is different depending on yourself and the object of your anger and so on. And then actually Lama Tsongkhapa himself talks about that later in the text. We'll probably get to that today. But anyway, I think the bottom line is anger is destructive. And it does destroy our hard-earned virtue, whether it's 1,000 eons worth or even just one day. Like on merit multiplying days, like yesterday, we usually try to create virtue. We put energy into creating virtue. And if we had, if all that virtue, all that merit was just wiped out, we wouldn't be too happy about that. So even one day's worth of virtue getting destroyed is regrettable, undesirable. So that's the point. So the conclusion is, let's do the best we can to learn how to manage our anger so that it doesn't get out of control and destroy our merit. So let's continue where we left off. We're at the top of page 257. So this next section is kind of a little hard because Lama Tsongkhapa is going into an analysis or an exploration of what it means when it says destroy roots of virtue. What does that actually mean? So, top of page 257, it says, some scholars say that that destruction of roots of virtue means that the potential of earlier virtue to quickly bring about its effect is destroyed, and the emergence of its effect is delayed, so that the effects of hatred and so forth emerge first. Their respective effects do emerge, however, if they eventually meet with suitable conditions. For no mundane path whatsoever can eliminate the seeds that are to be eliminated. So it is impossible for seeds to be eliminated by the mental afflictions. So that's a little complicated. Let's unpack that. So these are some scholars, unnamed scholars, and their view is when we have this phrase, destruction of roots of virtue, what that means is that it seems that the term roots of virtue is not explained here, but in Samsara Nirvana, Buddha Nature, it says, in general, the expression root of virtue refers to a virtuous mental factor, although it also seems to indicate seeds of virtuous karma. For example, karmic seeds created by the mind of generosity. So I think that is the meaning indicated here. I think it's talking about these seeds of virtuous karma that were created that have the potential to bring about good results, happiness, and following the path to enlightenment, and so on. So it's talking about the seeds of virtuous actions that were done. So these scholars say that those, this expression destroying those roots of virtue, those seeds of virtue, that the results are delayed. There will be a delay in the ripening of those results. And the anger or hatred that you generate, the results of that will ripen first, but then later, sometime later on, when the conditions come together, those seeds of virtue will bring their results. Yeah. So they're not like totally destroyed, but just delayed. And the reason they give for this, the last phrase, it says, no mundane path whatsoever can eliminate the seeds that are to be eliminated. So this is talking about when following the path. In fact, there's multiple paths, 5 paths: path of accumulation, path of preparation, path of seeing, path of meditation, path of no more learning. So along these paths, which are different levels as the mind is progressing to enlightenment or to nirvana, depending on what you're trying to attain. So what you're doing is eliminating or overcoming, abandoning the afflictions and the seeds of those afflictions. So that's what we need to do in order to attain nirvana or enlightenment. We have to get rid of afflictions like anger, desire, ignorance, and so on. And so the only thing that actually destroys the afflictions as well as the seeds of the afflictions is the wisdom realizing emptiness. In fact, the direct realization of emptiness. So that's the only thing that can really get rid of the afflictions and their seeds. And that only happens on the 3rd path, the path of seeing. So on the first 2 paths, a path of accumulation, a path of preparation, those are called mundane paths. Mundane because the term supramundane refers to the path of seeing, where you have the direct realization of emptiness. So from then on, it's called supramundane. But prior to that, it's called mundane. Just to distinguish that. So it's saying here the mundane path, meaning the first 2 paths, path of accumulation, path of preparation, that they are not able to eliminate the seeds that are to be eliminated, being the seeds of afflictions. So on those 2 paths, it's you can't get rid of the seeds, but you can suppress them. They can be sort of suppressed so that you don't have your afflictions jumping up all the time in your mind. But it's only when you reach the 3rd path, the path of seeing, that you can actually get rid of the afflictions. So they're saying that a mundane path, like the path of preparation, path of accumulation, path of preparation, can't get rid of seeds of afflictions and non-virtues. And so if that's the case, then it should also be the case that an affliction like anger could destroy the seeds of virtue. Does that make sense? How could anger destroy the seeds of virtue if mundane paths can't even destroy the seeds of non-virtue? That's their reasoning. Sounds reasonable, doesn't it? Yeah, sounds like a good way of thinking. And let's see what Geshe Zopa says. Oh, yeah, so he also explains it. So Geshe Zopa says, this is talking about this expression, destroying the roots of virtue. So he says, some scholars say it means that anger causes the experience of the results of the merit to be postponed for a long time. Their reason is that they are comparing the destruction of merit to the suppression of afflictions on the mundane paths, the paths of accumulation and preparation. So there, on those 2 paths, the seeds are still there, but they are powerless. although afflictions can still arise. And they say this is like cutting down a tree but leaving the roots. The roots are still there. And then the supra-mundane paths, the path of seeing and the path of meditation, they remove the afflictions from the root so that they never arise again, like removing the roots of a tree. So these scholars say that the way anger works on roots of virtue is the same way that a mundane path works on afflictions. It can't destroy their root. So I hope that kind of makes sense. So this is what the other scholars say, but Lama Tsongkhapa doesn't agree with them. So he says, this is not a reliable reason. Even though ordinary beings purifying non-virtues by means of the four opponent powers do not eliminate their seeds, it is impossible for the fully ripened effects to emerge, even if the conditions are met later on. So now he's talking about purification, like when we do the practice of 35 Buddhas, Vajrasattva, and so on, we use the four opponent powers to purify our our non-virtuous karma. So when we do this, we can't eliminate the seeds of those non-virtuous actions, because it's only the direct realization of emptiness that removes the seeds. But our practice of purification can stop those seeds of non-virtue from bringing their fully ripened effects. So what's the fully ripened effect of a non-virtuous action? Yeah, a rebirth, a bad rebirth, like, being born in one of the lower realms. So by doing the practice of purification, we can stop that from happening. We can stop those seeds from causing us to have a bad rebirth, but we can't remove the seeds themselves. The seeds are still there, but they're just kind of stopped. They're kind of suffocated, so they can't bring the results. However, strictly speaking, this is only possible for those who are on the first two paths. For us ordinary beings, that isn't really possible. So he goes on to say, once the peak and forbearance levels of the path of preparation have been attained, although wrong views and the seeds of non-virtues that become the causes of lower rebirths have not been abandoned, wrong views and rebirths in the lower realms are impossible, even if these seeds meet with their conditions. So this is talking about path number 2, second path, which is called the path of preparation. And that has 4 levels. They're called heat, peak, forbearance, and supreme dharma. And it said that on the second of those levels, the peak level, so once you reach the peak level of the path of preparation, you won't generate wrong views anymore. Your mind will not generate any wrong views. But the seeds for generating wrong views are still there in the mind, but they've just been so suppressed that they can't, function. They can't cause you to have wrong views. And then when you reach the third level, forbearance level of the path of preparation, then you won't take rebirth anymore in the lower realms. From that time on, no more bad rebirths. Now the seeds of, bad karma, bad karmic seeds are still there in the mind, but they just can't bring their result. It's impossible for them to ripen and bring their result. So that's what he's talking about here. So it's really only when you reach the peak level of the path of preparation, that you have no more bad rebirths. It's guaranteed that you won't be born in the lower realms anymore. So, but the seeds, you still have the seeds that are the cause for bad rebirths, but they are just like, kind of like burned seeds. Yeah, they say when you burn seeds, they can't bring their results. They can't grow anything. So that's what happens. So here he's talking about what happens with the seeds of bad karma when we do the practice of purification. We purify our bad karma. We can't get rid of the seeds until we reach the path of seeing, but we can, through practice of purification, stop the seeds from ripening and bringing their results. So this is one point that he's making here. And then next, another point. Vasubandhu states in the Treasury of Abhidharma auto commentary, as for the karma that produces cyclic existence, some is heavy. And that line is just part of a verse where Vasubandhu is talking about when, at the time of death, we come to the end of our life, we're ready to leave this life and go to the next life, and we have a whole bunch of karmic seeds in our mind, and any of them could ripen and cause the next rebirth. So there's this teaching about, which of those karmic seeds is going to ripen and cause the next rebirth. And so they say, first, if there's a heavy one, like if we have committed some particularly heavy karma, either a heavy non-virtuous karma, like maybe killing your mother or something, or a heavy virtuous karma, something we did that was really super virtuous. So, and there's different factors that make karma more heavy or less heavy. But anyway, so the point here is that, some karma is heavy. And then Lama Tsongkhapa says, accordingly, either a virtuous or non-virtuous karma, by ripening sooner, can temporarily block the occasion for another karma to ripen. However, it cannot be posited, nor has it been taught, that it can destroy virtuous or non-virtuous karma. So he's saying here that, in the case of all these karmic seeds that we have, a heavy one can temporarily block the ripening of another karma. You have a heavy one and a light one. The heavy one will come up first and bring its result, and that kind of blocks the ripening of the lighter karmas. So this is talked about in the teachings, this process or this situation with regard to karma. But he's saying, but it's never mentioned that this is a case of destruction. This isn't called destruction of karma, okay? That term isn't used. So just because a heavier karma can ripen first, temporarily block a lighter karma, that isn't called destruction. So he's disagreeing with what those other scholars say. Their explanation of destruction is just this, something blocking, coming up first and blocking another karma, but that will ripen later. So they're saying that's the meaning of destruction of roots of virtue. But Lama Tsongkhapa is saying, I don't think so, because we have this kind of situation, but it's not called destruction. Does that make sense? He's an amazing scholar. And then, then next he says, destruction of roots of virtue does not mean the mere temporary postponement of its ripening, Otherwise, it would have been necessary to teach that all strong non-virtues destroy the roots of virtue. So he's saying that, yeah, in the teachings and scriptures, it isn't mentioned that when heavier, strong karma blocks others, that's called destruction. Then, now he comes to his conclusion. Therefore, with respect to this, as Master Bhaviveka, that's misspelled there. It should be Bhaviveka. Anyway, Bhaviveka has said in his Blaze of Reasoning, and as was explained above, and above means back on page 147. That was when he was talking about purification with the four powers. So he already talked about this earlier in the context of purifying with the four powers. Neither non-virtues that have been purified by the four powers, nor roots of virtue that have been destroyed by wrong views or harmful intent can bring about their effects, even if later on they meet with the conditions. Just as a seed that has been damaged cannot produce a sprout, even though the conditions are met. So this is his conclusion. He's saying that, and quoting Bhaviveka, he's saying that the meaning of destruction of virtue, which we're talking about here, what does it mean to destroy virtue? He means, the meaning of that is, it will not be able to bring about its results in the same way that burned seeds cannot bring their results. So it isn't just a mere postponement of the results, the good results of virtue, but there won't be any good results. Really bad news. Yeah. And then he goes on, moreover, even though accumulated bad actions are cleared away by purifying them with the four powers as described above, this does not contradict the fact that they delay the arising of higher paths. So we can do purification of negative actions that we have created, but even if we purify them, it's still possible that they will delay good results, like attaining higher paths can be delayed as a result of our non-virtue. And he says, thus, in some people, the effects of giving gifts and guarding ethics, such as the arising of excellent wealth and bodies, are destroyed. So he's saying in some cases, when you do something non-virtuous, then you won't get the effects, the fully ripened effects of the virtues that you've created. So the effects of giving is to have wealth, and the effects of ethics is to have good body, meaning fortunate rebirth. So in some cases, those effects will not arise. The destruction of the non-virtue is such that, the destruction of virtue is such that you won't get those results. However, owing to the effect corresponding to the cause, familiarization with giving and the mind of abandonment, that refers to ethics, the roots of virtue of generosity and ethics arise again easily and cannot be destroyed. So he's saying that even if, you practice giving, if you have, the virtue from generosity, and that could bring the result of getting wealth. So getting angry could destroy that possibility of getting wealth. You won't get the wealth. That effect has been destroyed. But, there's different results of karma, and one of the results is as it called, the effect, the result similar to the cause in terms of a tendency, having the tendency to do that action again. So that may not be destroyed. So you'll still have the tendency to be generous, to practice giving. And so I was thinking, like, an example might be somebody who is born impoverished, they're financially struggling, and but they're very generous. There's lots of cases of that, right? Sometimes they say poor people can be more generous than rich people. So maybe that's an example of that, that maybe they got angry and that destroyed the result of being able to take birth with a lot of wealth, but they still have the tendency of their old habit of being generous. That is still there. That result hasn't been destroyed. So even in this life, they're poor, but they still are very generous, have a generous heart. So maybe that's an example of what he's talking about here. In others, the arising of the effect corresponding to the cause as a continuum of similar type, meaning, I think that's the same thing, this tendency to do the same action again, inner ethics and so forth, that is destroyed, but the arising of an excellent body, wealth, and so forth is not destroyed. So I think he's saying there that this would be another situation where anger, getting angry, can destroy the tendency to do that action again. That particular karmic result is destroyed, but the fully ripened result of having wealth or having a good body, that is not destroyed. So I was thinking examples of that. We can see examples of that in the world, like a person who's born wealthy. Yeah, lots of cases like that. Somebody who's born with wealth, or they very easily acquire wealth in this life, but they're not generous, right? They're very stingy, very selfish. So I won't mention any names. But yeah, I mean, people sometimes ask me about that. They say, but if you say that generosity leads to wealth, but then you see these cases of people who are wealthy, but they're very stingy. They're not generous at all, right? So seems to be what he's talking about here. So that could be because, okay, they got angry, and their anger destroyed, some of the ripening results, some of the results of their generosity. So they got the wealth. That result came, but they didn't have that continuation of that habit. The result similar to the cause in terms of habit. Mm-hmm.
I've always struggled with the thought of being in the hell realms, and I can imagine I would be incredibly angry being in the hell realms, and how you could possibly get out of the hell realms if you're cultivating such strong anger and that familiarization and that habit of being angry. Like, it seems like that would just make it way worse. So how do you get out?
That's one of the reasons they say we should really make sure we don't go to the lower realms, because once you're there, it's extremely difficult to create any virtue and get out. You just keep perpetuating the same attitudes and the same behaviors that got you there in the first place. And so you're just perpetuating your rebirth in those realms. Very hard to get out. So I don't know what the answer to that is. I mean, there are Buddhas and Bodhisattvas going to those realms and doing what they can to help the beings get out. So maybe they are able to. I mean, they say that the Buddha, in one lifetime way back, I mean, sometimes it said that's where he generated bodhicitta. But there's some doubt about that he could actually generate bodhicitta in the hell realm, and it could be that he generated great compassion, because he was with this other being, and they were forced to pull this cart and being whipped, and it was a really horrible situation. And this other person with him was really struggling and falling down, and the Buddha in that lifetime said, "Never mind, I'll do it myself, let him go and I will do it." So he had this incredible compassion for the companion, and that got him out of the hell realm. As soon as that thought arose, he got out. So it's not impossible, but I think very difficult to generate positive thoughts and do positive actions to get yourself out. And that's why we pray so hard for our kiddies and recite mantras for them and take them around stupas to make sure they get some good imprints that hopefully will ripen in better rebirths in the next life. Okay, then he says, again, others, as described above, will have some realizations of the path that enable them to completely traverse it within one eon, unless anger toward a bodhisattva who has obtained his prophecy arises in their minds. So here he's talking about a person who has achieved one of the paths and would be able to cross that path in an eon, but it's possible while they're on that path that they may generate anger towards a bodhisattva who has obtained the prophecy. And that expression, I think Venerable Chodron has explained it as well, it means, when you reach a certain level of the path, the Buddha will actually make a prophecy about when you're going to reach enlightenment. And that only starts from the path of preparation, the second path. So anyway, this is talking about someone who's on the path but gets angry at a bodhisattva who has obtained a prophecy. And that means kind of a high-level bodhisattva. And he says, if one thought of anger arises, their traversal of the path within one eon will be delayed, although the path that exists in their mind stream is not relinquished. So they don't completely fall off the path. They still have the path, but there'll just be a delay in how long it will take them to reach the next path. And he says, in brief, I think that when it comes to purifying non-virtue, not all of its efficacy is necessarily purified. Isn't it likewise the case that when it comes to the destruction of virtue, not all of its efficacy is necessarily destroyed? So he's saying, just as when we do purification of non-virtue, it's not definite that we completely clear away all of the possibility of that creating suffering. In the same way, when we do something that destroys our virtue, then, it's not all of its efficacy is necessarily destroyed. So there's still some possibility of experiencing its results. So anyway, in short, he's saying there's different possibilities you can't say getting angry is always going to have the same effect. Yeah, but it depends on different factors. Let me just see. Geshe Sopa says, so Geshe Sopa says there are various levels of destruction of the virtue, roots of virtue, seeds of virtue. He said the worst is that the main result won't come. You won't get a good rebirth. But anger doesn't necessarily destroy every result of virtue. such as, the result similar to the clause, having the tendency, so that might remain. So anyway, there's just these different possibilities of what it means to destroy virtue. Then Lama Tsongkhapa says, nonetheless, this is an important point, and since it seems necessary to analyze it in reliance upon the Buddha's unique scriptures and the reasonings based on them, you should look at the Buddha's excellent teachings and analyze. So this is something to be analyzed. He has analyzed it, but I don't think he's saying this is definite. I guess other scholars might analyze it differently. Does that make sense? But again, I think the bottom line is let's try not to get angry, because it's not good for us. And destroying virtue is definitely something we don't want to do. And he says, thus, the invisible faults of anger are that it propels very unpleasant, fully ripened effects, like bad rebirths, and prevents the emergence of other very pleasant, fully ripened effects. So it can stop us from having good experiences, good rebirths, and so on. So these are invisible faults, meaning we can't see them. And it said that it takes a Buddha, an omniscient mind, to be able to see these subtle aspects of karma, cause and effect. You do this, and then this will happen. You do that, and that will happen. So we don't have the ability to see that, but a Buddha, an enlightened being, an omniscient mind, can. And then he goes on to talk about evident faults. These are things we can see in this very life. So the evident faults of anger are taught in Entering the Bodhisattva Way, Shantideva's text. You do not experience peace of mind and certainty. I wasn't sure about certainty, but I think another translation might be instability. So, I think we can all see that in ourselves. When we're angry, our mind is definitely not peaceful. It's also not stable. It's very kind of, crazy and chaotic and difficult to think clearly. So we can see that for ourselves. And then previous joy and happiness are ruined and not achieved later on. So, it destroys our happiness, our joy. We can't really be happy, can we? Although some people say they feel good when they're angry. But maybe it's the adrenaline rush, the rush of adrenaline. You got all this energy. And maybe also, if you're getting back at somebody that hurt you, right? Somebody hurt you, and you were really hurt and upset about that, and you managed to get back at them. So there may be a good feeling there, but is that happiness? Yeah? Is that really happiness? I don't think so. Maybe it's just the ego, yeah? Your ego got smashed, and now your ego feels all puffed up again. But deep down inside, you really look deep down inside, you don't think, you'll see it's not real happiness. Sleep does not come, yeah? Anyone had trouble sleeping when you're angry? Yeah, so it definitely interferes with good sleep, and also dreams, yeah? You have bad dreams, nightmares when you're angry. And happiness, I read that. And the mind does not remain at ease. Right? So it's not, it makes you restless, right? You can't sit still. You just gotta. I haven't looked into this, but just briefly read that like in the West, some scientists have done research on the effects of anger and found that it is harmful for the health. It's harmful for the heart, can create high blood pressure, heart problems, even cancer. So it's bad for us physically. And more stress, mentally, emotionally. So there's research in the West that confirms what the Buddha said. If your hatred is strong, even those you nurtured with kindness forget about your kindness and kill you. That's possible, right? There's those two brothers who killed their parents, the Menendez brothers. They were like abused, weren't they? I think they were really harmed by their father. And so that's an example of, even children killing their parents, or even friends and relatives get irritated and abandon you, right? Anyone had that experience? Losing friends, or people just wanting to keep away from you as a result of anger. Even those you gather through generosity do not stay, right? So people we've helped with gifts or with other ways of helping, but if we get angry at them, they're gonna leave us, not want to hang around, and so forth. So these are results of anger we can see in this lifetime. So that it's helpful to see that, to look at those experiences, and also look at the experiences of others in the world. Entering the Bodhisattva way says, there's no bad action equal to hatred. There's no austerity equal to patience. Therefore, patience should be practiced earnestly and in various ways. Thus, you should contemplate the benefits and faults and make an effort to develop patience in many ways. So this is, really helpful. Very, very, very helpful. Because, when we're in the heat of the moment, the heat of anger, right? There's some situation happening and anger is coming up in our mind, and we might feel justified. Justified in being angry. This is right. It's right to be angry because this person has just done something horrible. Is such a jerk, So at that moment, then we may not think that, no, wait a minute, maybe I shouldn't be angry, unless you've really contemplated the faults of anger. If you've really thought about it now, looked at all the different teachings about this and contemplated it, and you really can feel, anger is not good. So that will help you at that moment to think, yes, maybe it seems reasonable to be angry and react with anger, but then there's all these faults of anger. So those can help you to stop yourself from acting out the anger. And there's one thing in Chandrakirti's text where he's talking about anger, patience, and faults of anger. One of the verses talks about how getting angry about something that's been done doesn't undo it. So it's quite useless. And I thought, wow, that's that's a great, So somebody drops a plate on the floor and it smashes into pieces. Okay, you could get angry about that, but is that going to put the plate back together? Or getting angry at the trees, all the trees that have been cut down on our neighbor's property, is that going to bring them back? So it's just kind of obvious in a way that getting angry about that isn't going to undo what was done. What's been done has already happened, Getting angry doesn't help. But of course, in some cases, there are things you can do. Maybe you can pick up the pieces of the plate and glue it back together, or buy a new plate. So, or in the case of, injustices happening in the world or in society, these riots that are going on, then there's things you can do on the level of activism, go to protests, write letters to elected officials, and so on. So you can, like Shantideva says, look for ways to deal with that situation, to remedy that situation. But getting angry, is that going to do any good? It also messes up our mind. It makes it difficult to think clearly and be able to come up with good solutions. You can't think straight. So it's much better to cool down, calm down, get your mind clear, and then think, okay, there's this situation. What can I do about it? How can I remedy it? How can I manage it? Okay, so then, bottom of page 258, he says, it should be understood from the Compendium of Training, Shantideva's other main text, that hatred is not the only faulty conduct that accumulates both major, fully ripened effects and the destruction of roots of virtue. There are also holding wrong views that deny reality, like karma, just saying there's no such thing as karma, or there's no such thing as enlightenment. Wrong views, it said that, generating wrong views, holding wrong views, which isn't just having doubts, but being definite, saying there's definitely no such thing as karma. I don't believe in it at all. No such thing as enlightenment. It's just rubbish. So you just totally close your mind to those ideas. So that's also said to be something that destroys the roots of virtue. And then abandoning the holy Dharma, that is usually mainly rejecting certain aspects of the Dharma and saying they weren't taught by the Buddha, like saying, oh, Buddha didn't teach the Fundamental Vehicle Sutras, or Buddha didn't teach the Mahayana Sutras. So that is abandoning the Dharma. Despising and being arrogant towards beings such as bodhisattvas and gurus and so forth. So if we have really negative attitudes towards holy beings like bodhisattvas and our spiritual teachers, so those are also ways that we can destroy our virtue. So we should try to avoid those. But here he's mainly talking about patience. So there's 3 types of patience. So now he's going to go into the ways of cultivating those 3. The first is the patience that is unconcerned with respect to harm. So what that means is when situations where we are harmed, somebody's harming us, trying to harm us, doing things that hurt us, then learning to not respond with anger and retaliation. So this is the main type of patience. If you investigate whether someone who harmed you was free not to harm you, you will find that he did not harm you while in control. So in other words, is that person in control of themselves? Are they in control of their minds? Right? So even though they may look really calm and, like they know what they're doing, but their mind, right? Whenever somebody does something harmful, like we know that for ourselves, when we do something harmful, usually it's because we have strong afflictions. Not usually, always. Always there's afflictions in our mind. Ignorance about the true nature of things, anger, hatred, arrogance, so a whole array of afflictions taking over our mind. So the afflictions have taken over the mind, have taken control of the mind. And so we're not really in control. We don't have any choice. So if you can think about that with regard to the other person, the person who's behaving harmfully, then that's helpful. He or she generated the desire to harm you out of causes and conditions, such as the seeds of mental afflictions from previous habituation and improper attention. So this person had seeds of afflictions in their mind, and they came up and they got all caught up in thinking certain ways, deluded ways, afflicted ways, and that resulted in them being harmful towards you. Also, owing to them, he or she engaged in activities that inflicted harm and thereby produced suffering in others. For under the power of another, the mental afflictions, he had become as if their slave. So when afflictions come up really strongly in our mind, we're like a slave, like a puppet, We're not really in control. It's the afflictions that are in control of us. And so if you can think about that with regard to the harm giver, the harm doer, that they are like a slave, like a puppet being manipulated by their afflictions. And they harm not just you, but also others. That's the situation that they're in. They're not acting out of positive qualities like wisdom, compassion, love. Those aren't active in their mind, but it's the afflictions that are active. So that's one thing that can help us to not get angry and want to retaliate. Anger is also unreasonable when someone harms you under the influence of something else without control. For instance, someone possessed by an evil spirit might, under its power, wish to harm you while you are trying to help him get rid of it. Were he to strike you, you would not get even the slightest bit angry at him, and instead you would think, he is acting like this now because the evil spirit has robbed him of his freedom. You would put effort into doing whatever you could to free him from the evil spirit. A bodhisattva should also act like that. So and I think in Tibet and other Asian countries, as belief in spirits taking possession of people. We don't have so many stories like that here. Some, like the devil, yeah. But we could replace this with mental illness, right? So we could think of somebody who's mentally ill, so they have schizophrenia or they have, bipolar or whatever. What's the other one? Psychoses, yeah. So we talk in terms of people being mentally ill. And when someone is mentally ill, then they're not in control of themselves at all. And so doctors, psychiatrists, nurses, and so on, the people who are helping that person, taking care of that person, will not be, they won't take it personally, that person hits them or yells at them. I mean, they probably don't like it, but they understand that the person isn't in control of themselves. It's the illness, the mental illness that's controlling them and making them behave that way. And so their attitude, ideally, will be compassion and the wish to help them, to help this person to be free of this illness or get it under control so that they're not behaving that way. So that's a helpful analogy to the situation where someone is under the control of the afflictions, because they are like mental illness. They are like a mental illness. And so if we can think that way, that can help us to not be offended and take it personally and then, get angry and want to hurt them in return. and instead be able to respond with compassion. Compassion is much more effective also if we can meet that person with compassion, with kindness, with the wish to help them. And then there's probably a better chance that we will be able to help them. Because otherwise, if we get angry and retaliate, that's just going to inflame them even more. Make them even more upset, more wanting to hurt. But if we can respond with compassion, then understanding and the wish to help them, then it's much more effective. And then a quote from the 400 stanzas, Arideva's text says, just as a doctor is not disturbed by one who is gripped by a spirit, or we could say a mental illness, and angry, the sage beholds the mental afflictions and not the person afflicted by them. So this is helpful to separate the person and the mental afflictions or the mental illness. So the person, is a being with positive qualities, with Buddha nature, isn't permanently negative. But then there's these afflictions or mental illness or evil spirit that is affecting them, influencing them, causing them to behave in this way. So making separation and have compassion for the person, try to help the person and put the blame on the mental afflictions. Master Chandrakirti also says in his commentary, there is no fault of sentient beings. This is no fault of sentient beings. It is a fault of the mental afflictions. The wise who have analyzed this in detail are not disturbed by sentient beings. So if we can have that wisdom, that understanding that the real problem are the afflictions in the mind of the person. And the person just doesn't have control over the afflictions. They can't help themselves when they're in that situation. Moreover, the experience of suffering produced by the one who harms you is the experience of the effect of a negative action accumulated by you, yourself, in the past, and the action is thereby exhausted. So this is another way of thinking that's really helpful, that we ourselves created the karma to be in this situation where this person is acting harmfully toward us. This is happening to me and not somebody else because I created some negative action in the past. I probably acted like that. I did harmful actions in the past, and that's why this is happening to me. So in some cases, we might be able to think of things we did in this lifetime, maybe even to that very person, right? So then it's easy to realize, okay, I created the cause for this. I'm experiencing the result of it. But that isn't always possible. We may not be able to remember doing anything harmful to that person in this lifetime. But if we can accept past lives, that we've had past lives, and in a past life we may have harmed that person, or we may have harmed somebody else. And so we created the karma, the negative karma, that is ripening now. We're now experiencing the ripening result of karma that we created in the past. So Buddhists who believe in karma would think that way and not blame the other person, not get angry at and blame the other person, but just think, I am the one who put myself in this situation due to my own karma. And on top of that, then if you think, okay, it's like paying back a debt. Yeah, having karma is a bit like having a debt. So when it ripens, when you have this bad experience, then you're paying off the debt. We always feel good when we pay off a debt, we're clearing that debt, freeing ourselves from that debt. So in this way, if we think I'm paying off my karmic debt, we no longer have that karma, that's a good thing. It means I've reduced my karmic collection. My collection of bad karma is now smaller than it was. And so that way of thinking, you can even feel some relief. Good thing that this is happening. I don't. And then on top of that, he says, if you cultivate patience toward it, you will not newly accumulate causes for experiencing suffering later on. Whereas if you get angry, you will have to experience even greater suffering. So that's helpful to think too. If I get angry at this person and react with anger, I'm just creating more bad karma, more causes of suffering. And I'll just keep having suffering, the same kind of suffering, the same kind of problem again and again and again in the future. Whereas now I have a chance to stop it, to, say, no more, end that karma. And also just in this life, without thinking in terms of karma, if somebody hurts you and then you hurt them back and then they're going to be angry and want to hurt you again. And that's how feuds happen, which, can go on the whole life. And even with families or countries, it can last for generations. And creates so much suffering. So better to avoid that. Better to just say, okay, now I'm going to put a stop to this. It's been long enough. I don't want to do this anymore. So we're going to practice patience. And patience doesn't mean like if someone is harming us, we just let ourselves get beat up, walked all over. I mean, if we can protect ourselves, run away, or do something to protect ourselves, then that's fine. But the point of patience is your attitude. It's what's going on inside of you. Yeah. So what we're trying to do is not have anger, not have hatred towards the person who's harming us. And so even if we try to stop them or call the police, because if you allow someone to harm you, just get away with it, then they may harm other people, continue that harmful behavior. So it is good to try to stop that person from doing more harm to other people, but to do it with compassion and not with anger and hatred and the wish to harm them. So also on the level of like a national level, I saw a talk that His Holiness gave in Tel Aviv many years ago, and he was talking about this, because that's a big issue there, What do? We just let, Hamas bomb us and kill us and so on. I think it was during one of the intifadas when there were all these bus bombings and other, terrorist acts. And if I remember correctly, it was a long time ago that I saw this. He was saying, no, you do stop people from doing harmful things, but it's a question of your attitude towards them. You do it without anger, without hatred. So it's not easy to do, but that's the ideal in Buddhism. Because people often wonder about this, what does it mean to be patient? Just let people do anything, let people do all kinds of harmful things? No, because it's also not good for them, right? If you let people do harmful things again and again and again, they're creating bad karma. They're creating cause for their own suffering. So it's good to find a way to stop them, but in a non-hateful way, with compassion. So then, and he says, it is therefore quite appropriate to bear minor suffering in order to turn away greater suffering. Like when one is patient with bloodletting, burning, and so forth as methods for curing a serious illness. So these are talking about methods used in the past for healing someone who is sick. We could think of, other methods used now, like surgery, chemotherapy, and so on. So when we have some illness or some injury, and the doctor says, it's good to have surgery done, good to have some chemotherapy done. So it's unpleasant, it's painful, but we put up with it in order to live longer, to be free of that particular illness or injury. So saying it's similar with the practice of patience. So putting up with small difficulties now with an attitude of patience, tolerance, forbearance, whatever you want to call it, will save us from bigger suffering later on if we don't have patience, and if we act with anger and retaliate, then we'll have more suffering in the future. So that's a helpful way of looking at it. So here in this text, it's very short, the explanation of this type of patience. In the Lamrim Chenmo book, there's 12 and a half pages on this particular topic, but mainly it's from Shantideva. He's taking some of the methods, verses from Shantideva and Shantideva's advice on dealing with patience. So I thought maybe no need to go into that, because you recently had teachings from Venerable Children on the whole book, all of Shantideva, and I'm sure she spent lots of time on chapter 6, and now she's going through the book Working with Anger, which is also based on chapter 6 of Shantideva. So yeah, so we won't go into all of that. So we have a few minutes left. If there's any questions, Venerable Sang.
So although we have to wait till with the forbearance and peak levels of the path of preparation for all the karmic seeds to be where they can't produce negative rebirths and wrong views. But as ordinary beings, the purification we do does do that to the specific things we're purifying. Is that true?
It's not 100% definite, because they say it depends on how you purify, how strong the regret is, and so on. So there's no sort of fixed recipe formula. But they do say that, different effects can happen as a result of doing purification. Like, we can't completely get rid of the seeds of the karma, but it is possible to. One thing is reducing the effect, so that instead of like a whole rebirth, a bad rebirth in one of the lower realms, you may get a headache, or you may get sick in this lifetime, or you may have an accident. So that's why they say when we're practicing the Dharma, following the path, and we run into problems or illness and so on, we shouldn't feel discouraged and upset and angry about that, but think, oh, this is my bad karma ripening, and maybe this karma could have ripened in a much worse form if I wasn't practicing the Dharma. It could be a whole rebirth that is ripening now as a headache or a sickness. So in that way, I'm clearing off that bad karma. So that's one effect of purification, that we just get a lighter sentence than otherwise. So I'm trying to remember, what are other ways that karma gets purified? I can't remember. It's in volume 2. In what's it called? foundations of Buddhist practice, yeah. So in the section on karma, after the section on karma, then talks about purification and the different, yeah, what can happen as a result of doing purification.
So, of course, I completely agree with you that we should try not to get angry every day. And the reality of it is that these seeds of anger are in my mind stream. And, you know, a day doesn't go by when I don't get some kind of frustration or irritation. And so what I have to do, because I could really beat myself up about this every single day, is just to realize, you know, these seeds of anger are on my mind. And I'm going to do whatever I can, and then I get overwhelmed by previous created karma and afflicted mental states. So there's this balance that I have to try and watch so that I don't just keep beating myself up. Oh, I did it again.
Yeah, that doesn't help either, because that's like being angry at yourself, right? So just as it isn't appropriate to be angry at other people, it also isn't appropriate to be angry at ourselves. So it's good to learn not to do that and be kind to yourself, be patient with yourself, and yeah, just have this resolve. Okay, I'll do the best that I can. I mean, at least if you're not trying not to act it out, yeah, try to do that. That's like the first step. Try to zipper your mouth and not hit somebody or break something. So try not to act it out. Try to keep it inside, even if you have to go for a walk, you know, go out in the woods or go to the bathroom or whatever. Get away from that situation so you don't do something that you'll regret later. So at least that's, I mean, pat yourself on the back for that. You know, rejoice that you can at least stop yourself from acting it out. When you think about all the people in the world who don't do that, yeah, who do act violently or, you know, verbalize their anger. So just the fact that we can stop ourselves from doing that is fantastic. And then keep working. I mean, it is good. After an incident where anger comes up, it's good if you have time to think about that and try to think what happened and how did I get to that point and what can I do next time? Like do a dress rehearsal. Okay, next time if that situation happens, what will I do? How will I think? And try to prepare for that. That's really helpful. Because it's, I mean, there's the seeds of anger, but there's also the conditions. You know, various conditions. Tiredness certainly doesn't help, and hunger, yeah, if you're hungry, or I've heard this expression, hanger. Yeah, they talk about hanger. I certainly can relate to that. Heat, huh? Yeah, illness, pain, heat, yeah. So conditions like that can also contribute to the arisal of anger. So try to understand what triggers there are, what conditions there are that lead you to getting angry, and then work on those. If you can, eliminate them, avoid them. Prepare yourself. This situation is going to be tricky, yeah, so I might get angry, so what can I do? Yeah, so I find it really interesting when I do this myself, just looking at my mind and understanding my mind, how my mind works and how anger comes up. It's fascinating. Very educational, very enlightening. Because everyone's different. Each person is different. What triggers anger and doesn't trigger anger. So we have to explore our own mind. Okay, so we've gone over time. So let's conclude, dedicate the merit for the benefit of all beings.
May the spiritual teachers who lead me on the sacred path and all spiritual friends who practice it have long life. May I pacify completely all outer and inner hindrances. Grant such inspiration, I pray. May the lives of the venerable spiritual mentors be stable, and their virtuous actions spread in the 10 directions. May the light of Losang's teachings dispelling the darkness of the beings in the 3 worlds always increase. Idam Guru Ratna Mandalakam Niryatayami. Due to this merit, may we soon attain the awakened state of Guru Buddha, that we may be able to liberate all sentient beings from their sufferings. May the precious Bodhi mind, not yet born, arise and grow. May that born have no decline, but increase forevermore.